In this video, I'm going to talk to you about compound miter saw safety. A compound miter saw is a saw that's primarily used for cross cuts. A cross cut is cutting across the grain of the wood. And you can do straight cuts, cut at an angle called miter, or cut where the blade is actually tilted, or both. If it's mitered and beveled, then that's what's called a compound cut. That's why it's called a compound miter saw. As with all power tools, you have to follow safety rules. You must wear eye protection at all times. You have to wear hearing protection. These things can get loud. And you have to tie back long hair or secure loose clothing or jewelry because you don't want anything that could get caught in the blade and pull you toward the blade. Finally, you do need closed-toed shoes to protect your feet in case things drop. So if you look at this blade and you look at the teeth of that blade, they're curved, which kind of looks like, and it's true, that this thing will be spinning this direction and it'll make the cut going this direction. And what that means is as you're cutting, that blade is pushing down on the piece of wood so that it's pushing the wood flat against this surface. And it's also pushing back against this fence. So if you have a piece of wood here, it will be tended to be pushed down and back. So you have to know that because that's how you're going to have to set the piece of wood on the machine. And you are going to push down on the piece of wood and push back against the fence. As a matter of fact, one good technique, you notice this person is kind of reaching over the wood and it's actually kind of holding on to the fence itself too so that your hand is stable and you're holding the wood in a very secure way. The blade is the dangerous part, so you must keep at least a minimum of 4 inches away from the blade. Any part of your body should be at least 4 inches away from the blade. And be careful if you're going to angle or do a miter or bevel cut, because let's say you're doing a miter cut, it may look like your blade is fine enough distance away at the start of the cut, but if it's heading towards your hand, then you have to really plan where the cut's going to go and make sure that your fingers are always 4 inches from the blade. If it's too close or if you don't feel comfortable, or if it's a dowel, which is like a round surface which is hard to hold securely, use a clamp. There's a clamp on the miter saw. Or you can use a hold down tool. This tool, you can kind of push down on this tool. This is nice and firm. So if you push down on this tool, it kind of levers and pushes this end. So it's holding the piece down for you, and this can be pushing down closer than you'd want to ever have your fingers. So here's the way that you make a cut. For a narrow piece, a piece that's not too wide front and back, you are going to lock the sliding mechanism. Normally this blade can slide back and forth on these rails, but if you lock the sliding mechanism, it won't slide and it can just pivot down, and that's one way to make a cut. So you lock the sliding mechanism, start the blade, and let it spin before you cut the wood, and then bring the blade, just kind of pivot it down and cut through the wood, and then stop the blade at the bottom before you lift up the blade. It's more likely, I think, that you'll have wider pieces and need to actually use the sliding mechanism. So the way this works is you slide the saw towards you, start it and get up to full speed, then bring the blade down, and as you push it away from you, that's when it's going to be making the cut. And you'll just be continually putting downward pressure to keep the blade buried as it goes into the wood. And then finally, same thing, let the blade stop before you lift the blade up and remove the piece of wood. The reason you have to let the blade reach full speed is because if you don't, the blade will be jammed against the wood and it probably wouldn't even start spinning. Or if it does, it will jam the wood and try to kick the saw blade back to you. Kickback is a really, really important concept to understand, and it's very dangerous. Kickback is if something happens to jam the blade, since it's spinning this way, and let's say it's all of a sudden stopped because it's been jammed, the whole saw could actually come back towards you, and that's a very dangerous situation. Another thing related to kickback is if it jams a piece of wood, and even if the whole blade mechanism doesn't kick back, it'll try to kick the wood out and send that flying, and having a flying piece of wood is dangerous as well. So to prevent kickback, important things. Number one, if you're going to clamp or hold a piece, do it only on one side of the piece of wood. Don't clamp both sides of the piece of wood. Because as you make this cut, you can kind of picture this cut. If this cut's going through, what's going to happen is this piece of wood can just kind of naturally have a place to move away from the blade. It's not going to be pinching the blade or causing the blade to jam. But let's say you had a bigger piece of wood and you clamped it and it has no place to move, then you're essentially holding a piece of wood next to a really spinning blade, fast spinning blade. And if that just gets caught in this blade, once again, it could either kick this piece of wood or kick back the blade. Either case is a dangerous situation. So only clamp one side of a piece of wood and let the other side just kind of move away from the spinning blade to safety. If there's anything weird or wonky about the wood, just don't make the cut. Ask an instructor for help. Things that are bowed or warped can cause kickback or jam. Reclaimed wood might have staples or nails in it, and those can just send pieces of metal flying. Pressure-treated wood or wood that has paint that could contain lead, you don't want any toxic chemicals going into the air that you're breathing in. And wood with loose knots, the knots could go flying. The knot is like a little place where a branch used to be coming out of a piece of wood. Okay, and then there's just one little technique item is after you make a cut, the saw actually removes some wood. That's where the sawdust is coming from. So there's a little sliver of wood that's been removed, and this is called a kerf. And so to be accurate when you're making cuts, just pay attention to where you want your cut to be and where you want that kerf to be cut out of. For example, if you make this measurement, and let's say you want that 20 centimeters, up into that line, that means you don't want to cut on this side of the line because then your piece will be too short. You'll want to cut on the far side, the waist side of the piece of wood. Depends on where you made the measurement, because if you're measuring from the other side, then you want to do it the other way around. Okay, so this tool is really powerful, and it can be safe if you treat it with respect and follow the safety rules.